Hello, Judy. Good to see you. So we
Emma.
both run Quaker groups inside prisons. Yours is in a long term, mine's in a remand. So can you tell us a bit about how your group works?
Well, we run ours weekly and we run it as a multi-faith group. So it is Quaker led, but it is open to prisoners who choose to register as anything or none. We have at the moment, around a dozen. The list is a little bit longer than that, but generally every week we have a good core and there's 12 or so. They arrive from wings all over the prison, so the arrival is quite staggered, and therefore our group length is an hour and a half, so that we have an hour to actually be together. And there's a lot of chatting to start with because it's the one time often that the people can see each other from different wings. And so we actually, when we settle down to worship, we actually have a candle. We light a candle. I know it's very controversial within a Quaker meeting to light a candle, but it does act as a way to cross the threshold from the ordinary chit chat to going within, and we use it especially for people. I before we actually go into quiet, we have 30 minutes of quiet. I do a little spiel and I will welcome anyone that hasn't been before, or if it's been a very chatty, whatever has happened the previous week, there might be a few reminders about sharing. But anyway, so I do a chat, and one of the things that I do with the candle is to just talk about the image of the flame as a light, as the light inside us, that of God within us, which is a familiar Quaker phrase. And so it's a visual representation. It acts as a focus so that we very much try to encourage the men in a sort of presence practice. In fact, one or two of our visitors lead them often at the beginning of the quiet in a presence practice. The idea to just encourage people to spend time being as fully present as they can in order to have a sense of the circle and of just being in the room and leaving everything behind and not worrying about what's to come and being fully present. That being the sort of access to, all the worship. And
Mm.
so that lighting the candle, we also use that as an opportunity to hold people in the light. So we name individuals or situations, and that allows people to get used to contributing. Then we have 30 minutes of quiet, and there is ministry usually uh, from the men themselves. And I have one or two visitors that come in as Quakers as well, and they may bring something or say something. So usually there's in the half hour, there's two or three little bits of ministry. People generally are used to standing. It gets them, is a commitment to actually speaking and also helps people hear. Because when we're a dozen, it's a bigger circle and we need to be able to hear. Um, I can say more about the ministry
Yeah.
perhaps later, but we finish off with a ring of hands, and I think that's another element that's really important. So often in Quaker meetings, as people may be familiar, we might shake hands with the people around us. We actually hold the ring of hands. So in a men's prison, that's quite a big deal. And initially, people who haven't come find that a little bit strange, but we hold it for quite some, like, I don't know, half a minute sometimes, and everybody looks around the circle, and it's wonderful. It's a real feeling of solidarity and compassion. I
Mm.
could almost use the love word, which, given the situation we're in, people might find that surprising.
Mm.
But it's one place where people can be more fully themselves, more open, more vulnerable, more honest. And so that compassion actually comes through, and that's good for them to experience a safe place to be able to do that. We then have a sort of informal, what might be called afterword, where with a little bit of sharing to do with what was said or what somebody may have thought about but not actually shared. And that again allows people who haven't spoken to be able to have their voice heard. And then we break up into drinks for the remainder time. So,
Yeah.
so we usually have half an hour of discussion and drinks. How does your group work?
So, well, yeah, mine's very similar, but it's interesting the metaphor that you use of the light, because I use this metaphor, this image, if you like, as a presence practice, which I really like that phrase, of imagine we're sitting around a small lake or a pond, and the water is choppy when you first come in, and all the noise and the stress of life. And then as we kind of come together in the circle, the waves kind of settle, and soon the surface of the lake is calmer. And I use that as my presence practice, as you call it, so that eventually it's completely still, and we're all imagining this, this lake, and you can imagine the surface reflecting the heavens or whatever, and you can use that as a metaphor. Isn't that interesting?
Mm,
You've got two very different ones that work in the same way.
mm,
Yeah. The other thing that I've just started is handing round a basket of small readings. I just did it just in the last month, which is a little snippet of a reading, either from the Bible around stillness and quiet. So, for example, the still small voice, or anything about waiting for God's presence, and then all sorts of ones from advices and queries and things. And they pass this basket
mm,
round, and they take one, and many of them choose to read that out. But of course, my group's very different from yours in that they're not with us for as long. They're only with us for a few months. So I've got to quite quickly
mhm,
kind of help
mm,
settle into it, if you like.
yeah.
Whereas I suppose yours come for years at a time, do they?
Mm. Yes, we've had I mean, one man who left recently had been with us since we started, and we've been running 10 years. So, yes, that does make a significant difference. When we had COVID and we could, I could feel how we'd lost the core identity of the group.
Mm.
And we've always had one or two significant either individuals who will almost be like an elder within that group because they've got experience of it. And we had one man that wrote a poem every single meeting in response to what was shared by others. And this was a man who had not really had any education, had taught himself to read and write in prison, really, really took to creative writing. And he would literally write a poem on a pad a certain size. He would have no crossings out, and it would be perfectly formed and rhyme in a very beautiful way and in response to other shared ministry, other shared speaking. And it was a real gift. So when he left, we really, so it does ebb and flow. So the person will act as a sort of focus for others, and other people learn how to, well, not learn how to be, but can see, have a role model.
Yeah.
And when they leave, then it's interesting how when a dominant person goes, other people gradually step into that space. It takes a bit of time.
Yeah.
But yeah, we do have very, very long termers.
Yeah.
Um, so we've got people who've been there 6 and 7 years. We have, some people bring readings prepared
Yeah.
and may use them or not. So yeah, it does have its own momentum now.
Yeah. So let's talk about how we got these started then, because one of the things that I find that new prison chaplains are a bit daunted by setting this kind of thing up.
Mm.
How did it work for you, and what advice would you give to somebody wanting to set something up?
Well, I had experienced a similar meeting to what I now run in another prison, and I looked after it while the chaplain was unwell, and so I'd experienced it. And so when I got to my new prison, and I had a manager who was a contemplative person himself, we didn't have any contemplative group at that time, and I just wrote a little offering, about what I would like to do, and he was open to that.
Mm.
And because it's offered as a multi-faith meeting, it offers something that the chaplaincy doesn't otherwise have.
Yeah.
And it's an entry point, if a chaplaincy team look at it as an entry point for people who, for whatever reason, are not sure about religion or have had bad experiences and don't, for all the reasons that, yeah, sorry, that
Yeah.
don't have any uh, expectations. And it's a an unthreatening, accepting place. And our poster does use the word, quietness and acceptance as being something that the group offers.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my group is called the Quiet Group, and some people just don't feel able to come on Sundays to a large group, and it might be social anxiety or whatever. So as you say, using it as an entry point is, and for all faiths and none. I mean, we have people who say, "Well, I'm agnostic, but I'm spiritual," or something along those lines,
Mm.
and it gives them one thing that they can come to.
Mm. One thing I didn't know before well, I did have a glimpse of it at Gloucester, where I was before, and which has now shut. It shut quite some years ago now. Um, I didn't realize how much I would get from it personally, but I find it as nourishing as my community outside, almost. Yeah. I mean, I'm lucky to have a good community outside as well, but particularly at those. So I found the group has ebbed and flowed over the years I've been running it, but we feel in a very good and healthy place at the moment. And
Mm.
so both groups are nourishing, but I get a lot from it. They
Well,
surprise me a lot in what they're willing to share and how brave and open they are, and it's not easy in a prison for men to express the softer emotions, but it's part of being fully human. It's no good just shutting all that side of you down and not having any way of expressing it. There's tangible support that they show each other. If I give one example, if I may, we have a man who's been coming who's got complex issues. It would be apparent if anyone saw him, but also there's a lot of invisible, issues that he's carrying. And he's quite challenging. He finds it quite difficult to sit still and so on. And a lot of staff never would have believed that he could do that.
mm,
But he comes, and other people in the group, particularly one man off another side of the prison, if you like, because we mix our mains wing and our support wings. Um, People from both sides of the prison. A man from the main part of the prison was very, very supportive of him. And it turned out that he had a sister who had similar needs, who had died. And so his wish to support this other man was very, very obvious and kind and really appreciated by the man himself.
yeah.
And it was there for everyone to see. So although other people in the group at times felt irritated by some bits of behavior on occasions, this really, supportive man offering a different, like I didn't have to do that.
Yes.
Other person did it. It was really, really lovely. And there are many examples of where people step up to support. Somebody went out recently because something wasn't, it took them by surprise, and their default position was to just withdraw and go out. And someone went and spoke to him and brought him back in. And again, that would have been hard. Well, I could have tried it and it might have worked, but it's really lovely when they do it for each other. So
Mm.
the community aspect of it over a longer period of time as well is very, very important. And they love meeting up with each other because they don't have a chance
Yeah.
necessarily in any other space to do that.
Yeah, yeah. It's really interesting what you say about people who perhaps have ADHD or anything like that, who, some of my colleagues will say, "Oh, I wouldn't think he's going to settle down."
Yeah,
And actually it's often the people who the most, I call them bouncy, they're
yeah,
full of beans, and they're very chatty. And you kind of think, well, everyone says this person's never going to quieten down. But I know for myself, I mean, I'm very talkative. Lots of Quakers are very talkative and bouncy. And that's why we enjoy this contemplative practice, because it's permission to stop, and it's an encouragement to use this period to just switch off. And
mm,
that really is amazing to see how that works, I think, when you
mm,
get the most talkative people that you
mm,
never get a word in edgeways, but they take to this quiet time in a really beautiful way.
mm.
Yeah, it's lovely.
And they are able to articulate what they get from it, and they're so surprised. But it's exactly what you'd like to hear. This is the quiet. I can sit on my own in my cell. This
Mm,
is not the same kind of quiet.
mm,
And the calmness and the peace, which is in a prison setting, it's very hard to get away from all the noise, isn't it? Uh, have that place, but also, there is that environment, and then there's the being able to share and have your voice heard, a
Yeah,
part of the inside of you, which everybody needs to try and express in a safe place, where it'll be heard and understood.
yeah,
It's part of being fully human, which I think is a really important part of what this kind of group will offer in a prison.
mm,
Because I don't think any other group necessarily I mean, in a study session maybe in chaplaincy, but not in a worship situation. I think we've got a unique way to offer something, and depending on what people need,
yes.
they'll find it there, won't they?
I agree. I agree. You said a little bit about your community on the outside, and I just wondered, I mean, I've always found that uh, these groups inside prison are some of the most nurturing and spiritually nourishing experiences, and it very much enriches my own faith. What do you have any thoughts about whether, Quaker meetings on the outside could learn a bit from how we do things
Mm.
inside?
Well, yeah, I spent some time writing an article a few years ago, based around Advice 18, about how do we build a community and how do we show um, forgiveness, channels of forgiveness and support to each other. And it is all there. I mean, the thing about prison, if you've been in prison, you'll know this, but perhaps it comes as a surprise if you aren't in that environment. I mean, it's so intense. It's like life is just intensified. So all aspects of life are just squeezed into a smaller space, and uh, that's all the emotional highs and lows and everything. Um, so
Yeah.
it's just that I think because it is like we've just described a moment ago, that unique space, people, it's a complete contrast to everything else that's going on in the prison. So therefore, all of those things all of those sort of needs to be able to speak and be heard and to listen to others and realize that you're not the only one feeling like that, or you can actually hear other people will say what a rough time they've had and how they've got through things, and there are people that are willing to talk and share that, how they got through it, and support each other through it, so you can hear all that going on, um, in a way that just perhaps takes a longer it is in a longer time frame outside. um, That's one thing that occurs to me. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I just think that the chance to invite people in from my Quaker meeting as visitors and volunteers to begin
Mm,
with, they're not sure if it's for them, but very quickly, or they begin with by feeling I'll do it for the men, I'll do it for the prisoners, but very quickly they see how nourishing it is for us.
mm,
Um,
mm,
and actually, you realize that it's a very, very sacred space and experience that
mm.
we can help create those conditions where there's deep
Yes.
sharing about all sorts of issues, which are just life issues, bereavement and addiction, and these kinds of issues are the ones that come up really. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's very enriching for the meeting outside as well, because we take these experiences, and I think it changes everybody really.
Mm, exactly. I have a particular Quaker volunteer who comes in and helps me. She's got vast experience of outside of being a counsellor, particularly in bereavement. And
Mm.
I run a bereavement group separately, which has nothing to do with the Quaker group, but yeah, absolutely. So the bereavement, when I first started working in prison, I don't know if you find this, I couldn't believe how much bereavement individuals have, how complicated families have. We have in my social bubble that I live in, I would have no idea the complicated and chaotic sometimes, and life that some of the men that we have in our meeting have had to navigate in their lives. So it gives me a much better understanding, and the visitors as well,
Yeah.
a much better understanding of of how they come to be there. Obviously, they share they share what they want to. We don't ask intrusive questions. It's not appropriate, and we're not there to push faith on people either. We just take people at whatever. We're listeners. We're listeners and supporters of people's humanity, and we try and reflect back what we can see of the gifts that they have, despite everything that's happened to them. To be able to be, we all need people to mirror back to us aspects of ourselves to have some sort of sense of self-esteem. I think another reason why what's so enriching about the group is that people are at their bottom, at the low, they're right at the bottom of life, if you like. So there's nowhere else to go. They've got nothing to hide, and so they're more open than perhaps we would be on the outside. We have, there has to be a sort of some reservations, not reservations, but holding back. We can't be quite as open as perhaps men might be in a prison meeting. So that enables conversations at a deeper level. So whenever we have those conversations outside in our community as well, knowing each other and the things that are eternal, to use a well-known phrase, then we feel we're really connecting at a deep level, and it is that connection and that the relationship and the circle that is so nourishing, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you.